Hello and good evening. Good evening for me, good morning or good afternoon for you. Yeah, welcome everybody. So we have 2 minutes to go. My first question is, as always, if the sound is okay. So that's my first one. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And yes, and as you all know, so we are on world virtual tours, and so this presentation is being recorded and is also being recorded for YouTube. So you will be able to find this presentation for a few weeks also on the World Virtual Tours YouTube channel page. Very easy to find, and afterwards I will also post the link. And yeah, so good, nice. Yeah, I see many familiar names. I'm not going to mention the names since this is on YouTube also. So yeah, from all over the world. That's always so nice. So that's the advantage of this technology, that we can reach people, and then it's recorded. So at least for a few weeks it will be available. And then I'm also going just to share my screen just for a test. So if you can still hear me during the sharing, that's the last test I'm going to do. Okay. Okay, so now I'm sharing my presentation. And so I just hope that you can still hear me. This first slide is the general slide of the World Virtual Tours Free Academy. So we're going to talk about masterpieces of the Italian Renaissance, but specifically fresco cycles. So, okay, now I'm just going to come back to Zoom. And okay, so you could still hear and say, okay, then everything is okay. And then, yeah, all is good to go. Okay, so then I will go because I have a lot to tell, and I try to time it, but it's impossible, of course. So, and I have the tendency to speak very fast. So I just hope, since it's really very hard to slow down because I really want to say as much as possible. And so, okay, now I'm going to close the chat. Just before I close it, I'm just going to put again, this is World Virtual Tour, so this is only based on donations, so that is the only way we can keep this going. So here is a link if at the end, you thought it was worthwhile and you wish to leave something. So now I'm going to close this. I'm going to close the chat, and then I can okay, and now I can, yes, here I have to close the chat. Okay, so now everything should be okay. And so officially, welcome everybody. Welcome here from my home here in central Italy. So I'm near the capital of Umbria, in Perugia. So my name is Patrizia. I'm a local guide here. I'm an archaeologist and art historian. And welcome everybody to this talk about one very famous and intriguing Renaissance fresco cycle. And that's of course, the very famous chapel in Arezzo painted by Piero Della Francesca. That was requested several times because it's a quite impressive and quite intriguing theme. And but I must say, so when I take people here as a local guide, when I take people around here in central Italy, so mainly in Umbria and Tuscany, the fresco cycles are amongst my most favorite sites to bring people to and to explain, because often people just see the paintings, but then you see the stories, and then you see what it means and why it was painted, how it was painted. That makes it always much more interesting. I mean, I like that, and so that's why I suggested to World Virtual Tours to do this series of talk. So let me share my screen, and then we can really start with the presentation. Okay, and so this is a free academy, so it's a series of four, well, they call it the lessons, but so presentations. And so today we're going to talk about Piero della Francesca and the legend of the True Cross. Then next week, I will talk about the Collegio del Cambio by Perugino, Pietro Perugino, one of also the great Renaissance painters. Collegio del Cambio is situated in Perugia, and it's a bit special because it's not a religious building. So this building was the guild of the money changers. So a civilian building. So that's perhaps interesting to see something that is not only religious. And then lesson 3, we have the Last Judgment by Luca Signorelli in the Cathedral of Orvieto. Also something very special, of course. And then I will end with the Libreria Piccolomini by Pinturicchio in the Cathedral of Siena. So these are all presentations from home as this one. And so I started Piero della Francesca because also chronologically, this is something like, you could say 50 years before the other ones, the 3 other ones. So we're in the middle of the 15th century. Yes, so this is all based on donations. So here is a link, and I will also post it in the chat. And so this is the first talk about Piero della Francesca. And so Piero della Francesca, so he lived throughout most of the 15th century. So we don't know exactly when he was born, but it must have been something like 1415, 1416, 1418. We're not really sure, but we know exactly when he died because there's a document in his birth town, so the town where he was born, where he lived, where he was buried, and that is the town of San Sepolcro in Tuscany. And here we have a map of Italy on the left, where you can see the red area, that is the region of Tuscany highlighted. And on the right-hand side, you can see the different provinces of Tuscany. And so Tuscany is a region, and then the region is divided into provinces. And the provinces are always named after the capital of the province. So we have the province of Firenze, we have the province of Pisa, and we also have the province of Arezzo. And the birthplace of Piero della Francesca is in the province of Arezzo. So you see on the very eastern border of Tuscany. And so San Sepolcro, so Holy Sepulchre, that's really the name of this little town in the Tiber Valley. But so it's not that far from Arezzo, so it's really in the area of Arezzo. But I must say there's a whole massive mountain in between, so it's not just it's around the corner, but there are some mountains in between, which is not surprising. And so this is a map of the province of Arezzo. So you can see this biggest spot, Arezzo, more towards the bottom in the center. That's the municipality of Arezzo. So all these names that you can see are the different municipalities in the province of Arezzo. And you can see that Arezzo, so above it on the right, you have Anghiari. Anghiari, very famous for the Battle of Anghiari, which, was, Piero della Francesca, he lived at those times. So he knew about this big Battle of Anghiari. That Anghiari is really across the corner of San Sepolcro. And then you see San Sepolcro. So it's really the area of Arezzo. And so Piero della Francesca, he died in San Sepolcro on the 12th of October, 1492, 12th of October, 1492. And that's, as some people say, that's when Columbus hit the shore. I mean, of course, now with the discovery of the Americas, I'm not going into that, but for the history, or in the history books, that date is seen as the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the new times. And so also you could say of the Renaissance. Of course, the Renaissance doesn't start on the 12th of October, 1492. It started way earlier. And so all throughout the 15th century, we have this whole searching for not only in the arts, to achieve perfection, to achieve perfect perspective, proportions, beauty of the representation of the human body, for example, but also in the philosophy, of course, they are really breaking away from more strict medieval ideas. And so that date is really special because that's when Piero della Francesca died. And so he is kind of character in between, I mean, he's not really medieval anymore, but it's not yet the high Renaissance that we know, 1500, Michelangelo, Raphael, and so on. Okay, now I'm going to take you to Arezzo itself. So this is a picture of the Piazza San Francesco. So this is one of the squares, really in the heart, in the center of the town of Arezzo. You can see the church on the left-hand side, or at least the facade of the church, a facade that has never been finished. So the church itself dates back to the 13th century. The 13th century, that's when the Franciscans, because this is, of course, Church San Francesco, so a Franciscan church with a monastery attached to it, or at least there was a monastery attached to it. And so this building was built in the 13th century, but it was, you could say, even rebuilt, and they added a lot in the 14th century, then in the 18th century. So, I mean, I can't say that the whole structure is from the 13th century. The roof, for example, as you can see, was redone in the 20th century. But so this is a typical Franciscan church regarding the shape, because this is one big hall. So that is typical because a Franciscan church was a people's church. So it was a church for the people, and it was a church where they would preach to the people, so with big gatherings. So it was, of course, good to have one big hall, but one big space. And you see here we don't have real lateral chapels. So on the right-hand side, you can see some structures, some architectural structures that are kind of limit of a chapel, but they are very shallow. I mean, it's just something that has been put against the wall because they're not real buildings, these chapels. So often families, they could sponsor a chapel. They had these like private chapels, but of course the main bit is near the altar. And so the chapel painted by Piero della Francesca is the main chapel, is the chapel in the choir, so in behind the altar. So really the most important spot of the whole church. And you see, it's not only that chapel that has been painted. Also on the previous one, you can see there are remains of paintings, of wall paintings, a bit everywhere. But you see, not everywhere, because a lot has been damaged. I mean, over the centuries, humidity, cracks in the walls, rebuildings. I mean, they didn't do very well. I mean, it was not good for the wall paintings. And so here's another view. So you can see, for example, the chapel on the right of the main altar chapel is also completely painted. And typically these are all fresco cycles. I mean, not the whole church, but so in the chapels you have fresco cycles. And so a cycle is really a series. So a series of paintings that tell us a story. And so we have some very, very famous fresco cycle. I mean, the most famous one is probably in the Sistine Chapel, the paintings by Michelangelo. But so also here, Piero della Francesca, he painted a fresco cycle. And I just wanted to bring your attention. So here, this is a view, a frontal view towards the chapel. So you can see the altar, the main altar, and then above the altar, you have this huge crucifix. So it's a wooden crucifix that has been painted by an anonymous master that we call in Maestro di San Francesco di Arezzo. So end of the 13th century, so typical crucifix of that time. And so I just wanted to point your attention to the fact that there is this huge crucifix. Now, the paintings by Piero della Francesca are behind this crucifix, as you can see. But just remember that there is a huge crucifix, because I'm going to talk about it again. And it's linked, of course, with the theme of this chapel, because the theme of the chapel is the story of the true cross. With the cross, they mean the cross on which Jesus has been crucified. And so the story of the true cross, that is the main theme of this chapel. Now, this chapel is a very high chapel. So when you visit in person, it's really very high. You need a good neck. And it's really true that the upper scenes are not really, yes, I mean, they're visible, but you can't see all the details because it's really very, very high up. And here you have an impression how high it is. It's huge, but immediately what strikes you are the colors. I mean, this has been recently restored. So they worked for more than 15 years on the restoration of this chapel. And so when it was reopened in the year 2000, I mean, by now it's already 20 years ago. So of course, everybody was amazed by these incredible colors. But on the other hand, people were not surprised because these are the typical colors of Piero della Francesca, so very icy cold colors. And for example, this is one of the scenes. I'm going to explain it later on, but just to tell you, this is one of the scenes before the restoration. There were a lot of problems. Due to humidity and due to kind of pollution, there were chemical reactions with the paint. And I'm going to talk about the technique of the fresco, or at least a little bit, but later on in this presentation, I have something also about the fresco technique. Yeah, so this is before the restoration. So, the colors had a bit faded, had been yellowish, and this is after the restoration. Now, I immediately tell you this is not really a very good picture. It's very hard to find pictures, even if you take them yourself, it's very hard to have the true colors come across. I mean, the screens, they change. So perhaps on your screen, it will be a completely different color. I don't know. So it's very, very difficult. But at least you see the difference. You see the difference in these very cold, these blues, these reds, these greens. They are very, very intense. And here you see this is a completely different idea. So you can imagine, when you see these frescoes live, that it's of course completely different. Now let's just immediately start with the story. So the first scene of the whole story of the True Cross is this one. Unfortunately, it's badly damaged. So really parts of the wall, I mean part of the plaster covering the wall was completely destroyed, as you see. So there are parts missing. It's a pity because the central part, as you can see, is this huge tree. And this huge tree is, of course, very important, for the rest of the story. And if you look at this, the tree looks a bit barren. I mean, looks like winter time, or looks that it has no leaves. But in reality, during the restoration, they noticed that there were leaves. I mean, there are still, I couldn't zoom in to show you, but there are some leaves, left, and that came out with the restoration. But so you have to imagine this was a very green tree, a beautiful green tree with green leaves, a very lush tree. So that is how you have to imagine it. So that's the central part. And in reality, on this scene, we have 4 moments. So there are 4 different moments that are depicted. And so the first moment is this one. So this in reality is Adam. You can see Adam, he is old. I mean, he was 900 years old. And he's weak, he's ill, and he knows he's dying. And so he cannot even stand up anymore. You see, he's leaning on Eve. Eve also by then, has a certain age. So he's leaning. And so he asks, look, I have a detail of Adam here. I mean, for 900-year-old, I mean, he's not in a bad shape, I would say, but I mean, he's talking to somebody. Look at his hand, one of his hand is up, and so he's talking to his son. His son is Set, and Set is a character that you can see on the left of this young lady who is dressed in a kind of animal skin. This young lady, she represents but I'm not really sure in English, because in Italian we said Adamiti, but the Adamites in English, I tried to look it up, but it's more like they see it more as a sect that developed later on. But with Adamiti, they mean the first descendants, and the first descendants of Adam. And so here we have a young lady, but next to her you have this man with the white hair and with the white beard, and that is Set. And Set, the son of Adam, he also has a certain age, as you can see. And so Adam is asking him to go to the gate of Eden, gate of paradise to ask if he can get the miraculous healing oil so that he would get better. And Seth says, okay, I'm going. But you can also see there's another character here, this young man that you can see in his, in his birthday suit with, leaning on a stick. And I have a detail of, of his head. And here you can also see the face of Seth. But if you look at this young man, with these typical curls, so that was a fashion in the hairdressing of young men in the 15th century. I remind you, we're in the middle of the 15th century. We're coming to the dates also a little bit later on. But just I wanted to dive immediately into the story. And so here you can see these very well detailed curls. That was a kind of fashion that you kind of like almost like a crown of curls. That was for the young man, in Florence or in Tuscany of the 15th century. And he's leaning on this stick. I also wanted to bring your attention to the black outlines of the shapes of the bodies. You see, there are clear black lines who are drawing the outlines of in this case, of the bodies. So we're going to come back to that also later on. But so here we have this man leaning on this thing. Now, first of all, a very strange position, with these crossed legs, leaning on the stick, and with one hand he's like sustaining his head. So this often is interpreted as an allegory of death. Because you see this young man, he's like waiting, he's patiently waiting. And the fact that he's leaning like this on a stick could be a reference to the Romans, because the Romans 2,000 years ago, and even the Etruscans, they had these characters, these creatures that were non-human creatures, but they were not Christian angels, of course, that were often represented also on tombs, like we call them, the geni, so the genies that would accompany you, and so that could be an interpretation of this character. And where did he see something like this? Well, Piero della Francesca, he went to Rome. I mean, he spent a lot of time in Rome, and perhaps he has seen this statue, or at least one version of this statue, because there are several copies of this statue in Rome still today, and they're all copies of an original Greek statue made by Skopas, a Greek sculptor. It represents Pothos, which is a kind of minor divinity, but could be that Piero da Francesco saw this statue. I mean, we know in the 15th century, they're all looking and studying classical architecture, classical sculpture, in order to arrive at these ideal proportions. Piero della Francesca was a mathematician. He was a theoreticus. So he wrote theory books about the theory of, the art of painting. And it was really a mathematical book. It was not how to hold the brush, but how to have your lines and your perspectives right, for example, how to calculate everything. And so could be, we know for sure that he made drawings of ancient, of ancient sculpture, of classical sculpture in Rome. So he made a drawing of a sarcophagus, for example. So he was inspired by that. So that's without a doubt. So it could be, we don't know it, but it could be. And then we have the next moment, you see Seth. So the son of Adam, he's going to the gate of Eden, and he meets the Archangel Michael. But the Archangel Michael says, no, I can't give you the miraculous oil, because this miraculous healing oil can only be given after when 5,500 years will have passed by. But I can give you a twig of the tree of knowledge. And when this twig becomes a tree, and when this tree bears fruit, then your father can be healed. And so, Seth takes this twig, he goes back, but he arrives too late, because Adam has already passed away. And this is the central scene, which unfortunately is so heavily damaged. So you can see Adam lying on the ground. I think I have it. Yeah, have a detail you see on it's a very audacious foreshortening that Piero della Francesca used there. Here, no, I'm sorry. Here you can see, and so it's really painted in foreshortening, and so you can see the desperate lady again. Adamita, so who is dressed in this kind of animal skin, and here in this. Oh no, I'm sorry. Here in this detail, you can see on the right-hand side in the lower corner, you can see that set, but unfortunately the rest of his body has gone, but you can see his hand planting this twig in the mouth of Adam. And you can see the people standing by. Now there is this character with this very bright red and blue garment. So that's the only one who has this type of garment. The other ones are all these first descendants of, Adam. And there's a lot of speculation who this could be represent. But I think I'm not going into that because otherwise it would take us too long. But there's nobody who really knows who this is. I mean, but it must be someone special. I'm sorry. If you look back at, I'm sorry. If you look, no, I don't have the general picture anymore, but you can see they're all, he's the only one who is dressed like that. No, I'm sorry. I'm messing with the arrows. Okay, and then on the left, we have these two intriguing characters, which are beautiful. Really, yeah, I like them a lot. They're beautiful. And you see they're looking at each other, or even not really at each other, but they are not participating in the rest of the scene. So they're really on the side of the scene and they're not looking at it at all. Who are these people? Now, also first look at the hair. The hair of the young man, again, with this kind of crown of very small curls. And then the lady, she has also this typical crown of, braided hair or arranged hair, blonde, because that was the ideal in the 15th century Florence or Tuscany. So but the face of this lady, so that's so typical Piero della Francesca. You see, there's not really a very strong emotion there. Her eyes, their eyes have something. They are looking somewhere far away. So they have something, the eyes, but otherwise, it's really like this frozen moment and frozen character. So not a very deep drama or psychology here. And so who are these people? Now, the young man, well, that's very clear. We know immediately who this is because of his coat or this piece of textile that he has around his body and with two knots. Now, this is another example. This is Hercules. This, by the way, is also a painting by Piero della Francesca. He painted Hercules for his residence, so for his house, for his home in San Sepolcro. Now, if you want to see it now, you have to go to Boston. So he painted this, and this is typically Hercules. You see, with this, they call it also the Hercules knot. So this is a typical representation of Hercules, and so Hercules here, he's with this lady, and this lady is Alceste. So there is this myth, the Greek mythology, and I'm not going to tell you the whole myth, it's too long, but Alceste, in the end, she sacrifices herself to save her husband. And we know that when Hercules, when he heard that story, he was very sad about it. And so he went to the underworld and he brought her back to the living. So what are they doing in a church? What are Hercules and Alceste doing in a church? Well, Hercules, also especially in the Middle Ages, was often represented as a symbol of Christ, because he has this double nature. He is divine and he's human. And then he goes to the underworld and brings back to life people. And she, Alceste, she sacrificed herself to save somebody. So these are all symbols and references, of course, to Christ. And the sacrifice of Christ and also the cross, of course, they are also the theme of this whole story. But so Hercules, this Hercules also painted by Piero della Francesca in his home. Why would he paint just Hercules in his home? Well, that was a tribute to his mother. His mother, the mother of Piero della Francesca, she was born in Monterchi. Monterchi is a small village near San Sepolcro, also in the province of Arezzo. And look, this is the coat of arms, the current coat of arms of Monterchi. You see, it's Hercules slaying, one of the monsters, the Hydra, and that is the coat of arms of Monterchi. Now, how come that would really, unfortunately, you see, I could do a whole presentation only about that first scene, but that's not really the purpose of this presentation. But just to tell you, Monterchi, comes from the word Monte Ercole, so the Mount of Hercules. So there is evidence also of an ancient sanctuary, and then was Christianized. But that's why Piero della Francesca painted Hercules in his home. And also in Monterchi, so the home place, the birthplace of his mother, he painted this Madonna, the Madonna del Parto, also as a tribute to his mother. Madonna del Parto means the Madonna of giving birth. And this is also a typical Piero della Francesca. You see these very oval heads and faces of especially the female characters. Again, this is kind of gaze, these eyes that are not looking really anywhere, they're not fixing anything. Very special atmosphere, not really dreamy, it's really like unreal. And also typical Piero della Francesca, as I said, he played with perspective, he played with lines, he played with mathematical ideas and in the perspective. And so in the end, what he painted probably has this unreal atmosphere, because what he paints is not reality. He's not painting reality. He's painting something that he has in his mind. And it's a kind of projection of his mind, but not a projection of reality. And that is what makes sometimes confusing. For example, this Madonna, is she, the eternal question, is she standing in or out of this kind of tent or canopy? So, I mean, there's no answer to this, but just to tell you, so there is, it's like an unreal space. Now, okay, so here I like them. I mean, yeah, this is Piero della Francesca at his best, especially this Alceste, how he represents her. Now, this story, so that was the first scene, and I'm coming to the next scenes. But first of all, these stories, they all come from a book. And the book is called the Legenda Aurea. It was written in Latin. It means the golden legend. But legend, in this case, doesn't mean a made-up story. Legenda comes from, in the Latin, means the things that have to be read. So written things that have to be read. So stories, stories, the golden stories. And with golden, they mean important, really important stories. And it was written by Jacopo di Varazze. He was from Genova, so it was from Italy. So Italy. He, it depends what version. There's the French version, there's the Italian version, and so he always has another name. I have this version, so I'm going to just interrupt just 1 second to no, I can do it at the end. I have the books here. I have the French version. I don't know why. Can't remember, because I have these books since a very long time. They're very old, but so they are a whole collection of stories, everything they knew in those days. He has written this in the 13th century, so at the end of the 13th century. So everything they knew about the life of saints. So it's like a compendium. So it's really all the information is in these stories. So when he tells a story about Saint Francis or about Saint Anthony or about some other saints, he's giving all the information they have. So he says, okay, in this book we find this information, in the other book we have and the other information. So this is an incredible source of information. And so you can't visit or understand a lot of paintings, especially from the Middle Ages or even from Renaissance cycles, so stories, if you don't have that book. Now, here we have the chapel. So the whole chapel with the stories, Piero della Francesca, opened up. You see, here it's opened up. So there are 3 walls. So the left wall, the back wall, and the right-hand side wall. And so the crucifix, is hanging in front of the chapel. And in the back side, you have the window. So here you have different scenes. And so the first scene I just showed you about Adam is number 1 at the top right, left. Top right, excuse me. And then the next scene is underneath, is number 2. But then to find number 3, you have to go to the left, you see, on this middle wall. And then to find number 4, you have to cross over to the lower part of the middle wall. Then you have to go to the right, number 5, 6, and then you have to cross over again. Now, what is this mess? Now, why did he choose to paint it like this? Because, he's not the first one to have painted this story, the story of the true cross. This is also an opening up of another chapel, and that's the main chapel, the altar chapel of the in the Santa Croce. So the Santa Croce church in Florence, which is also a Franciscan church, there we also have the same story, the story of the true cross, coming from the same book, from the Golden Legend. And this was painted earlier. This was painted by Agnolo Gaddi. He painted that in the 14th century, so in the 1370, 80s. So this is 70 years before Piero della Francesca, but it's the same story. But this is organized in a chronological way. So you start at the top and then you go down, and so, I mean, it's much more. It's logical. It's the story. But Piero della Francesca didn't do that. So these are the stories of Piero della Francesca. And so in the end, it was very logical what he did. Because, for example, on the right-hand side, on the top, you have the first scene. And then across, so on the other wall in front of it, you have the last scene. So the first scene is in front of the last scene. Then, for example, to give you an example, the two bottom scenes, left and right, are two battle scenes. And then we have the middle scenes, left and right. There are two scenes which involve a very important female protagonist. And then also in the middle, I will show you afterwards so why they are related. So in the end, he did it thematically. You see, if you look on the left, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's all mixed up. But if you look to the right, then you see it makes sense. It really makes sense thematically. So he made horizontal areas. So he made it match horizontally and not, chronologically. But so you will see what I mean. Now, the next scene, unfortunately, I don't have these very good pictures, but so this is the next scene. So the second scene, here we have two moments again, and also two sides. So you have on the left is outside, on the right-hand side is inside. And we have this lady, look, oh yes, this is the other one. But look, this is the left part of the scene. So you have the lady, she's on the right-hand side, she's kneeling in front of a piece of wood, in front of a big beam. Behind her are the servants, and then you have the grooms with the valets with the horses. So this lady, this is the Queen of Saba. The Queen of Saba, or the Queen of Sheba. And this Queen of Saba, she had come from her kingdom to Jerusalem because she wanted to meet King Solomon. She had heard that King Solomon was very wise, and so she wanted to meet him. And so on her way to Jerusalem, she had to cross a river, and there was this big beam kind of serving like a bridge over this river. But when seeing this beam, she suddenly had this vision, and she said, this beam, I have to worship this beam, because this beam is a special beam. On this beam, the savior of mankind will suffer. He will die with this beam. And also, that will also be the end of the kingdom of Jerusalem. And so then she continues and she goes to Solomon. Oh yes, first I have these details of the ladies who accompany her. You see again these very oval heads of the ladies, with this typical very high forehead. They really shaved the hair on the forehead to have it as high as possible, because that was a beauty ideal. Yes, you see the neck of the lion. Now, the fact that they are so rigid, I mean, that they're not moving, it makes them more noble, noble in the sense, nobility. So really, yeah, this is not just anyone. Yeah, you can see the hair, how they made their hair, the head gear they have on. And then there is also, yes, twice there is this character of, you said jester, buffoon. Is this a girl? Dwarf, as they had on these records. I mean, there's another one in another scene here. So there's also a lot of talk about the symbolism in that. But I can't believe that time is ticking away. Look, it's ticking away. And I have to tell you the whole story. But so here we have inside the building. So this is the meeting of the Queen of Sheba, of Saba, with King Solomon. And so this happens inside. Inside, you see the architecture is a typical classical architecture. This architecture could come right out of a book by Leon Battista Alberti. So Leon Battista Alberti, a contemporary of Piero della Francesca, also an architect and also a theoreticus. I mean, he also wrote texts on, the architecture and how you had to be inspired also by the classical architecture and by the proportions of the classical architecture, as you can see. And so this meeting, let me see what I have here. You see the meeting itself. So also look again how beautifully, for example, the veil on the head of the queen is represented, and also the garments of the king must have been really very beautiful, almost like golden coat. And so you could say they're shaking hands, but this is a very special moment because in the other representations of this particular story of the true cross, they mention, of course, the queen of Saba, who is seeing and has this vision of the beam, but they don't specifically represent the meeting, the actual meeting of Solomon and the queen, which is kind of important because she is going to reveal this vision to the king. She says, this beam will be the end of the kingdom of Jerusalem. And so what is he going to do? The king is going to get rid of this beam. He doesn't want it to, to end the kingdom of Jerusalem. And so yes, so it's a bit important, but in the other versions, it's not really represented. But here you have to know, this was painted in the middle of the 15th century. Now, we don't know exactly when he painted. We just know he started after 1452 and he had ended by 1466. So in these 14 years, he has painted the thing, but we don't know, did he paint it in one stretch? Did he paint it in several stretches? Did he interrupt? We don't know. Even if he interrupted, because according to some people, he interrupted even for several years that he went to Rome. But even if he interrupted, I mean, the harmony, and he kept this whole thing. I mean, if you can't see that there hasn't been an interruption. So he remains really the same throughout all the scenes. So even if there were several years in between, but we don't know. That's the mystery about Piero della Francesca. We know his works, but the dates, we almost never know an exact date. So it's all speculation because there are not a lot of documents. And but you have to know, so we're in the middle of the 15th century, and Piero della Francesca, he had also spent time in Florence, and he was in Florence, I mean, in 1439, and that's when you have this incredible event, the event of the year, event of the century in Florence, and that was the arrival of the Byzantine emperor, or the emperor of Constantinople, you could say, Giovanni or John Paleologos, who came to Italy. So he had been in Italy already for some time, because he came to Italy to try to convince the Pope to have a reconciliation with the Greek Church, so with the Oriental Church. And so he went to the Consul, he also went to Ferrara, and then he came to Florence. And this arrival in Florence with 800 people, all dressed in incredible clothes, Oriental clothes that nobody had ever seen, that will be the talk not only of the day, but the talk of decades. Even 50 years later, the people were still inspired by all these garments. And so this arrival of Giovanni Paleologo has... and his stay in Florence has really inspired also a lot of artists. I mean, he's mentioned a lot of times. But so here we have the reconciliation. I mean, he's seeking to reconcile the church. Why does he want the Greek and the Latin church to reconcile? Well, because he needs help. Constantinople is threatened by the Turks, and so he really wants to have help and to have a crusade. But in order to do that, of course, he has to motivate them. And so this could be this reconciliation, very important. I mean, for us now, it looks like a detail, but in those days, that was really, for decades, it was really something very, very important. And for example, it's also represented on the doors of Paradise of the baptistry in Florence by Lorenzo Ghiberti. So here we have one of these 10 beautiful reliefs where Lorenzo Ghiberti, also here in the middle of it's a bit earlier than Piero della Francesca, but it's the queen of Saba and Solomon, again, holding hands, I mean, shaking hands or meeting. So that must be a direct reference to that. that event, or at least to the reconciliation. And the reconciliation took place, but it didn't last a long time. And here we have a group of people next to the king. And for example, this, you see, this is a portrait. This is a portrait, and this is a portrait of Giovanni Bacci. Giovanni Bacci, he is he's the sponsor really of this chapel, because the chapel is in reality called the Cappella Bacci, the Bacci chapel. It's the family Bacci, very wealthy merchants in Arezzo, who paid for the decoration, the paintings in the chapel. And so, the first testament who had been made for the painting of the chapel dated back already to 1410. So, many, many years before Piero della Francesca. But then, it didn't start. And then, a New Testament from another. So several generations really participated, for the decoration of this chapel. And so the ceiling was painted by Bicci di Lorenzo. Bicci di Lorenzo, who was an established painter of Florence, but he was already 74 years old when he started to paint in Arezzo. And so he died before he could finish it. And so he died in 1452. And so that's when Piero della Francesca took over. But we don't have the contract or anything. So we don't know, did he start right away or not? So that's something we don't know. But this is clearly, a wealthy person. This is clearly a portrait. Giovanni Bacci, and he's also represented somewhere else. Excuse me. And then we have the next scene. So this is one of the scenes next to the window, so on the back wall. And so this is the beam of the bridge that is being buried. As I said, so King Solomon, he wanted to get rid of this beam. And so he said, let's bury it deep, deep, deep underground. And so here on the left, you can see this man who is carrying this beam, like you would say, like Jesus would have carried the cross. And but this was not painted by Piero della Francesca himself. So Piero della Francesca clearly had the whole control of this whole project. He made all the preparatory designs. That is very clear. But he didn't paint this particular scene. And you can see that when you look on the right-hand side, we have a detail. Look at the curls. That's why I emphasize the other curls, because these are not the curls painted by Piero della Francesca. A painter would never go beneath his quality. I mean, you can't paint worse than, I don't say that this is bad, of course, but so this has been attributed to Giovanni di Piamonte. And also look at the garments. So on the right hand side, on this detail, you see the shirt. You have two white shirts of two people, and so this is not the same kind of representation of this, the draping of the folds in the fabric as you have, for example, here. You see, this is a completely different kind of delicacy. Somebody called these the macaroni curls. But that's perhaps too negative. So I don't want to go into that. And then we have an annunciation. Now, in reality, what would have followed this scene? So here you can see the beam is going to be buried far away. Then the scene that is not represented in the story is that then we have to fast forward to the time of Jesus. So when Jesus is going to be crucified, they just before the crucifixion, just in those days, they found the beam, because it was in a lake. And apparently people who went to bathe in the lake, they were all miraculously healed. So it was seen as a lake with water that could cure. But then, there at a certain point, the lake dries out, and then they find the beam, and they use this wood then to crucify Jesus. The crucifixion scene, which is, of course, crucial to the story, is not painted. Why not? Well, because we have this big crucifix. You already have the crucifixion, you could say, in the chapel. So at the entrance of the chapel, you have the real, the actual wooden crucifix. So he didn't paint the crucifixion, but he painted an Annunciation. Why an Annunciation? Well, that will become clear when you see the next scene. But of course, an Annunciation, that's the beginning of the story of Jesus, you could say. So it's, of course, related to the cross. You can see in the top corner, you can see God who sends the Holy Spirit to the Holy Virgin. You can see the angel with a kind of palm leaf in his hand. The palm leaf is a symbol of martyrdom, but also of victory. So both aspects here, the victory of Christianity, and then also the the martyrdom of Jesus, you could say. Then you see the Holy Virgin. She is again a bit inside, and the angel is outside. Look at behind the Holy Virgin. Look, you can see through the door. You can see in a room, it seems like a bed, and then is it a painting of a wall? Is it a wooden structure with all these kind of cubes? Very interesting. What you can see there. And this is another Annunciation by Piero della Francesca, made in Perugia. So this is in a museum of Perugia. It was made for a church in Perugia. It's part of a big there are several panels of a big altarpiece. But just to tell you, see here also again, this is the perspective gone into a lot of detail, as you can see. With again this kind of eerie atmosphere, this eerie sky. This is not a real building. This is not a real space that he wants to represent. This is something inside. Mental isn't mental. I know in English mental means crazy. I mean a mental a mental projection. So that's what I mean. Yeah, here we see God, and look, the face of God is the same as the face of Set. You remember? So, and then he will pop up even another time, this kind of face. And then if you look, they always, when we walk in the streets of the old towns, people always ask me, what are these metal things next to the windows? And so here you can see what it is for. And the metal things are still there. The sticks, the wooden sticks are not there anymore. But so that is something typical, because on these wooden sticks, you could hang all kinds of things, not only draperies or kind of curtains, but, you could, in winter, you could hang your salamis or so. So that is something that you will find very often. And yes, what do I have? Okay, here, detail of the head of the Madonna, again with this kind of transparent veil. You can really see how, she has brushed her hair back and very tightly. I mean, it must be a very tight bun. I mean, it must hurt really. So, but again, you see her face, and the lips also, they have these kind of expression of a more non-expression. And then we have the next scene, and that is the dream of Constantine. So this is often considered as the first real nocturnal scene or night scene. It's not really true, because there are other night scenes before that, but this is really a very impressive one. And this is before Caravaggio. This is before Rembrandt. This is the dream of Constantine. So Constantine is sleeping in his tent in a military camp on the night before he's going to a battle, the Battle of the Ponte Milvio. The Ponte Milvio, the Milvio Bridge, is, because it's not the Roman anymore, but there is still a Ponte Milvio. It's a bridge over the Tiber in Rome. It's one of the northern bridges. And that was a battle against Maxentius. And on the night before the battle, he has a vision, or he has a dream. He sees this angel. And I'm going to give you a detail, because otherwise you can't see it. There's an angel who's coming head first down with a tiny, tiny cross. And the cross is the whole light source for the whole scene. And also with one finger, he points directly to Emperor Constantine. And to come back, you see, so the cross, I mean, from here you can't see it, but you saw there's this tiny cross, and this tiny cross is illuminating this whole scene. You see, it's not a star, it's not the moon, it's not the sun. This is a night scene. You can see the other tents in the background, they're all still in the dark. And the angel, you see the upper part of the angel is also in the dark. So it's the light is not coming from above, it's not coming from the sky, it's coming from that cross. And it illuminates part of the tent, and then also the helmet of the right-hand side soldier. And from the helmet, it's going to reflect on the left-hand side soldier. You see, the left-hand side soldier only has his front illuminated, the back is dark. And then he has this spear, and with this spear, he's pointing towards the angel, and from the angel and from the cross. I mean, it's like a triangle. So very interesting. So, but this is very impressive. Also the colors, the light, when you see it live, it's really very, very impressive. And yes, this is the detail we saw. Here, I wanted to point your attention to the outline of the tent. In this case, they are not black, they are white. You see, we have white lines for the outline. And this is, of course, because this is a different contrast. This is a contrast against a dark background and not against a light background. And then we have the battle of the Ponte Milvio. Now, the battle, the scene of the battle itself is on the right-hand side wall of the chapel. And the scene of the Dream of Constantine that you can see here on the left, that is on the wall of the window. So you see, this is a corner. And I wanted to show you the corner because here, Piero and Francesca, he has this kind of very, it's like a little play because, I don't know, well, if you are there, you can really see it. But if you look on the very left of the battle scene, there is one head of a horse, like a grayish horse with some red gear, a riding gear. I can't remember how you call it. But so you just see the head of this horse. But if you look carefully, you can see that part of the head is also in the previous scene, in the Dream of Constantine. So it's as if the head of the soldier of the Dream of Constantine is also part of the head of the horse. And I must say, if you are there, it's really very clear. You can see it much better than on this picture. This is the battle. Now, in reality, there's not much drama. I mean, you see the part on the left, that is the part of the emperor, of course, the Emperor Constantine. You see the big banner with the eagle, with the imperial eagle. And then you can see, look, this is, oh yes, I'm sorry. This is something different. But you can see the river, the Tiber River. And so the victors are on the left, and on the right-hand side, you see Maxentius, who's trying to get out of the river, and they flee. And so this is the victory of Constantine. But so there's no actual battle. You see, they're not fighting. Right? I mean, it's already over, you could say. And in reality, it was indeed that Maxentius, he had laid a trap near the river for Constantine. So he had partially destroyed the bridge, the Milvio Bridge. But then the position of his troops was very badly chosen. And so when he wanted to retreat, there was no space. So he fell into his own trap, you could say. But that's a whole other story. But look at some details. Yeah, I wanted to tell you why they came into a battle, but that's the history of Rome, and that's perhaps too much. But look, this is Emperor Constantine with the little cross. You see, because what I forgot to tell you is, when the angel is coming with this cross, he shows it to Constantine in his dream or in his vision, and he says, "In this sign you will win. In hoc signo vinces." So you will win in this sign. And so Constantine tries this out, and look, it worked. This tiny cross is the reason for his victory. Look at the scene here. Yes, one of the details is, of course, it is armor. So Piero and Francesca, he could really paint. I mean, it's not just about perspective and about lines. He could really paint. And so here he represented an armor, of course, of the 15th century, not a Roman armor. And look, he had done it. He has done it on another occasion. This is the very famous painting, the Pala di Brera in the Pinacoteca di Brera in Milano. So here we see the Madonna, but then on the right-hand side, the kneeling person, that is Federico da Montefeltro, the Duke of Urbino, who commissioned this painting. And here you can see the armor. I just want to point to the armor. For example, on the shoulder of the armor, you can see there's a reflection of a window of a church. That's a really incredible. I mean, so he knew how to paint. He knew how to work also with light. During the 15th century, all these Renaissance artists, they were looking to find the perfect perspective, the perfect proportions. And so there were two ways to achieve it. One way was a mathematical way with lines, with a whole theoretical approach, a calculating approach. And then the other way to get depth and to get perspective is with light, how light reflects on the materials. And the Flemish painters, they did that. If you know Jan van Eyck, I mean, they had this method of working with light. And the Italian painters were more the rational, they wanted the rational painters. And Piero Francesca, he combines these different elements. So he knew exactly how to paint and to represent light and to play with light. This light gives life to these materials that are represented. And yes, and then look at Constantine and his head, the head that he has. You see, that is also something that we find several times not only in the paintings of Piero della Francesca, is on the left, but also on the right. That was a medal that was coined, to remember this arrival of the Giovanni Paleologos, so the Byzantine emperor. With these special headgear, so that will become a fashion. Here are some other details of this battle. You can see the trumpeter with his swollen cheeks. He's blowing. And no, this is again the other one. And then after the battle of Constantine, so Constantine is victorious and he converts to Christianism. So he will become a Christian Roman emperor. And his mother, Helena, she said, I'm going to the Holy Land. I'm going to Jerusalem because I want to find everything that I can find regarding this Jesus Christ. Also the cross. I want to find the cross. And so she goes to Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, there's one person who knows where the cross is located. And that was a man named Judas. But he doesn't want to reveal where the cross is. So no, I'm not going to tell you. And then she orders her men to torture Judas. So they put him in a well for 7 days without food. And so in the end, he says, okay, I'm going to tell you. And he's going to reveal the location of the cross, the cross of the crucifixion of Jesus. And so this scene is, you see, in front of the scene where they put away the beam. So on the right hand side, they get rid of the beam, and on the left, you will see this is where the beam will come back to light. So these two scenes are next to each other, and they're also related. And also, what I forgot to tell you, I said the Annunciation, the angel who announces, is of course next to the angel that shows the cross, or announces the victory to Constantine. You see, the themes are related. And now we have the next scene. So you see, this is the left-hand side wall, and in the middle scene, so you can see, for example, this building. So on the bottom is a battle scene, but in the middle, again, you can see a scene, and this is this one, but this is again a bad picture. But again, two moments. So here we have Helena. Helena is represented twice. She is dressed in black with this kind of conic crown. So on the left, you can see Helena, who's attending the excavation of the cross. So there's a man standing half in the ground. Here you have the detail with better picture, with better colors. So there's one man standing in the ground, and he has excavated, but not one cross, but 3 crosses, of course, because, Jesus was not crucified alone. There were 3 of them, and so they buried the 3 crosses. And now Helena has this problem. Which one is the true cross? And you see, this is what the story is about. She's going to she finds the cross, but she doesn't know which one is the true cross, the cross of Jesus Christ. And so that's why this whole story is called the legend, or the story of the true cross. Now, here we have, so the queen of Saint Helena. She's represented as a queen, you could say. This scene is the pendant, so it's in front of the scene of the queen of Saba. So you see, it's related. So on the top, you see the town of Jerusalem. And so this is a detail, or zoomed in. In reality, this is the town of Arezzo. That's very interesting. So it's supposed to represent the town of Jerusalem, but in reality, it's Arezzo. And we know that because, for example, there is this building at the top, this church with the red facade. Well, this is the Cathedral of Arezzo with this red terracotta facade. And on the left of this red facade, you have like a huge tower, but that has been destroyed later on. But we knew it was there. And then on the right-hand side, you can see this grayish building. On the left of the grayish building, you see a church, and it's almost not clear, but this church has the bell tower of this church has all these tiny windows. Well, it's this one. You see, this is the Pieve di Santa Maria in Arezzo, and this bell tower is still there, and it's called the Tower of the 100 Holes. In reality, they're only 80, but so that's quite interesting that he represents Arezzo. And then the other part of this scene is again Helena. She said, "How can I know which one is a true cross?" So there was a young man who had died, and so they're holding the three crosses one by one over this the dead man. And so when the true cross, the cross of Jesus, is held over the man, it comes back to life. And so that's how they know this is the true cross. Now, again, in the background, you can see this building with these different marble facades, different colors of marble or different colors of stone facade. It's not really marble. But again, this comes directly from Alberti, from this very classical Renaissance architecture. On the right-hand side, you can see a building, again, with these sticks, at the window. Here it makes more sense that it's for a kind of curtain, for example. And the bell tower with the pointed bell tower, that could be a reference to San Sepolcro, because it's very much alike the bell tower of San Sepolcro, the hometown of Piero della Francesca. So you could see there's so many details. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, but time is too fast. And then we have this scene, which is the battle. Just to go back in time. So when Adam dies, the twig of the tree is planted in his mouth. There is this big tree that is coming out. King Solomon, he sees the tree. He knocks down the tree because he wants to use it for his own building. But the beam, he makes a very nice beam, but the beam is always too long, always too short, and so they throw it in the river. The Queen of Saba, she recognizes the beam for what it is, and the King Solomon gets rid of it. He has it buried, and then we have to. Then there's a crucifixion in reality, which is not represented in the paintings, and then we are in the year 312 of our time. So in the 4th century. So 300 years after Jesus Christ, we have Constantine, the emperor, who's going to convert to Christianism thanks to this kind of vision, thanks to his victory in the sign of the cross. And the mother of Constantine, Helena, she goes to Jerusalem. She finds the true cross. She takes some bits home with her, but most of the cross remains at Jerusalem. Now, fast forward 300 years later, in the 7th century, Jerusalem is conquered by a Persian king, Khosroe. And Khosroe, he's finding he finds the cross, he finds also the column of the flagellation, so all these relics, and he builds a canopy, a kind of little temple. You see on the right-hand side of this painting, and with a throne. And so he has the people worship him. And so he's making fun of these Christian elements, and so so of course that is going to cause a reaction in the emperor of Byzantium, Heraclio. And so Heraclius, he comes with his army, and he's going to defeat Khosroe, and he's going to, to take back control over the cross, and the cross then remains safely in Jerusalem. But this battle is completely different from the former battle. I don't know. So here, you see, this is all mixed up. I mean, it's there's a lot of bloodshed. There's a lot of, but there's no movement. This is, again, a moment frozen in time. It's as if you have all these actors who were carrying out a battle scene, and then somebody screamed, "Stop! Stop the camera!" And so you see, this is the moment that is represented with a lot of incredible details again. And so here you can see all these weapons, so a lot of details in the weapons and the armors. Again, we have this kind of face with the white beard that we find several times. Here we have a beautiful, man with a kind of flute and this oriental headgear again. Here we have this canopy that Khosroe had built for himself. You see the cross on the left, and then you see the column and the rooster, also elements of Jesus Christ on the right-hand side. And here we have then Khosroe, who is being then executed. So he's going to be killed. You see, parts of horses everywhere. So this is a completely different, but again, a moment frozen in time. And so no real drama. And again, surrounding this Khosroe, the Persian king is going to be executed. You see, these are again portraits. We see this man in the middle with the red hat. That is Giovanni Bacci again. And by the way, also the man with the black beard. So it's, he often represents the same faces. And no, so here we have just 3 times the same face. So just to show you, so, and even in other paintings of him, he was going to represent this face. Yes, no, I wanted to share this detail. On the right-hand side, you can see the outlines. Look at the top of his head. The line is interrupted by these dots. They're all different dots. And that's where I wanted to come in. But I mean, I'm really sorry that it's so late, but I can't speak any faster. And I left out so much already. So just to tell you, a fresco, when we talk about fresco, a fresco, that comes from the Italian word affresco. So today in Italian, we say affresco with the 2 Fs, but it comes from a fresco, so fresh. So this is painted on fresh plaster. And so here you have the different layers. So you have, number 1 is the wall. So layer number 1, the dark gray, that's the wall. And then, of course, you have to, if the wall is rough, you have to have some rough plaster covering it. And then you have several coatings of plaster, sometimes up to 6 different coats of plaster, with always a different, what they call a grain. So in the beginning it's very coarse, and then it gets finer and finer. And so in the end, you have a beautiful whitewashed wall. And it's on that wall that you're going to make the design. So you're going to first the drawing, the sketch, and then on top of the sketch you will put layer number 3. And layer number 3, that's the it's a very thin, in reality it's a much thinner layer of fresh plaster, and it's on that fresh plaster that you're going to paint. And so the paint is going to dry on the fresh plaster and will become one with the fresh plaster. So there is a chemical reaction that makes it then one single layer. And here, this is a scheme, but in reality, they didn't do it all at the same time. And so on the bottom, you can see they are whitewashing the wall. But then, of course, it has to dry. If you have done it yourself, whitewashing a wall, it has to dry. It can't be too hot. It can't be too cold. It can't be too humid. It can't be too dry. And so then so it's not a simple job, a good whitewashing job. Now, when you have it all plastered over, then you can see on the top part on the left, they normally, also Piero Della Francesca, that's very clear. He made all his sketches. So first probably a small sketch, but then everything life size and real size sketches on paper. And then that sketch would be transferred on the whitewashed wall. You see, you could do it with these kind of grids, and then or you can put the paper against the plaster, and then you have several techniques. For example, here you see somebody has made a drawing on paper, and then he has put the paper against the plaster, against a whitewashed wall, and then with a very sharp metal object, he's going to draw on the lines. And so when he takes away the paper, he will have this. We will have these lines that will be incised on the plaster, and so that will be already a first aid or sketch. Or you can, you have your drawing on the paper, and then with a kind of needle, you're going to make all little holes. You see little holes on all the black outlines. You see something like this, and then you will put the paper with the holes against the plaster, and then you will go over it with a piece of linen or cotton and black, charcoal or black pigment, and you're going to go over all these holes. So when you take away the paper, you see on the plaster you will have these little dots. That's what we saw, on the painting. And so and then you can continue make you can draw the black lines and so on. And then on top of this, that's where you put the wet plaster. A very thin layer of wet plaster, because this underlying design has to come through, has to shine through the wet plaster. And then you have to be very quick, and then you have to paint on the wet plaster. And so you see, you will only paint a small bit. And so these are some other paintings, but that is, you see, it's all divided into several segments. So every segment is what they call a giornata, a day. So in reality, you can't wait a day. You have to work very quickly, and in 1 hour, perhaps 2 hours, already it is dry. So you have to be very quick. So you can only paint a small bit. And so every bit is what we call a giornata. And we know that the whole cycle of Piero della Francesca are 250 giornate. So we know that from the restoration, where they did all the research. So there are 250 bits in the whole cycle of Piero della Francesca. Now, it doesn't mean that he worked for 250 days or in a row. It depends. Sometimes he could do several bits in one day, and then he went perhaps for several years to Rome. So that's something we don't really know how long, he stayed there. And he wasn't alone, of course. He had a team, but he was really the chief of the team. This is the last scene. The last scene is that, of course, after having defeated the Persian king Khosroe, you see that Heraclius is bringing back the cross of the crucifixion to Jerusalem. But he came on a horse, like on a victory, but the gates of Jerusalem remain closed, and so he knows then that he has to remain humble. You see, he has to go barefoot, he has to take off his crown, and he just has to come as a simple pilgrim, and then he could enter the town of Jerusalem. And here you can see the people who are worshiping the cross. You see the walls of Jerusalem. Here we have another detail, beautiful details, and you can see these black outlines, that still shine through the plaster. And I wanted to end with this because I think this is, for me, this is the most beautiful. I'm really sorry that I went so much over time, but I'm still here. I have time. So to take a question, this is available also on YouTube. So for a few weeks, and also the next lessons. But so, I hope you had a little impression. So if you liked it, you can always leave a donation, because that's why we do it. And then, then I hope also to see you next week. Already, thank you for, for joining me. And then I will open the chat if there are some questions. But you see, it's almost impossible to make a summary out of it. That's always my problem. I'm really very bad at condensing everything, because then you have to leave out so much. Okay, now the chat should be open. So if you have any specific questions, and yes, so I mentioned Oriental several times, because that's how they called it in those days. So in those days they said there's a Latin and a Greek church, but yes, Orthodox. But even in the Orthodox, you have several divisions. But yes, that's what I mean. Yes. How do we know that Adam was 900 years old in that scene? Well, now I can show. Here we have. No, it's like this. So I have this version. I have the French version. I can't remember why I have the French version. I can't remember. But anyway, he wrote in Latin, so it's all translations anyway. But so I'm going to look for a copy. For a copy in English, because it would be nice to quote, but it's a bit tedious. But so here, for example, in the legend of the Holy Cross, see, it's written very small, and so it's quite thick. But here so he's giving all the information. So he's saying, okay, so he starts the story with Adam, and then he says, according to this source. Not in the Bible, but there are so many apocryph text, so that he says, in this text, they say that he was 900 years old by then. In this text, they say, so he's giving all the sources and all the information. But so we, and it's unfortunately I cannot quote, but at a certain point he says, that's what they say, and you can decide if it's true. He said it himself. He was a Dominican, so yeah. So this story of the cross is not a story in the Bible. So it's not like one story of the Bible. No, as I said, for the first time, this story is summarized here in this book. So this was written in the 13th century. Yes, and so there's another series of presentations about the Italian Renaissance, about the big masters of the Italian Renaissance, given by my colleague Lillian. So yes, but for example, Piero Francesca is before that time. Next week I will give you, Pietro Perugino. So 1500, the heydays of the classical Renaissance. So okay, what did I do? Yeah. So I'm seeing if oh yeah, yes. Wait, so I wanted to place the link of the for the people who want to watch back, or if they want to see the other one. So this is the link of YouTube. And then there is the link. There's another link. This is the link. Yeah. So for eventual donations, and then yes. So yeah. But there are several sources about Adam, and also about his descendants, for example, because in other texts there is mentioned his daughters are mentioned, but not all the daughters. In other sources, other daughters, again, other names pop up. So it's not just one source. Yeah, the only thing is very okay, what is there? Yeah, I can't. Every time there's a new element in the chat, it always goes back up. So and so I mentioned the name. So if you just look up the Golden Legend, the Golden Legend, or Legenda Aurea, you will find it. So very interesting, and really a must, to understand all these stories. Yeah, because many painters, they based the stories on on that book. Yeah, so I don't know if I missed any questions, because I always have to scroll down. Every place and time is every strange, at least I didn't. Oh yes, the fashions. Yes, with these these high four. Yes, I wouldn't be a fan of that. Now I am a fan of some of this, how what they did with their hair, but yeah, shave off the forehead and so. But yeah. So yes, but those high hats that you saw are I mean, it's not only Piero della Francesca. So if you look at the painters in the middle of the 15th century, especially in Florence, they will often, refer to that kind of fashion that was based on these people who came from the East. Okay, a favorite fresco? Oh no, there are so many. No, but I like frescoes. I like these stories because, it's always interesting to tell stories. Okay, so, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for your interest, and I hope to see you next week. And if you miss it, you can always catch up on YouTube for a few weeks. So, thank you very much again. Thank you also to Work Virtual Tours, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much. Bye. Bye bye.